Hello and welcome, guys, to the Improvement Season podcast with me, the man himself, Pascal Floor, and on the other side, Steve Hall from London. So last time we actually covered a couple of questions from the listeners from our community, and I thought, well, not just me, but we thought that it might be a good idea to throw it out once again. So we asked the question whether people would like to get some questions answered once again, and people were quite active in our Facebook group through many questions at us. We thought that we want to cover that this time around, right? So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your past week, Steve, or should we just get straight into the questions?
I guess, there's probably not much that's really changed for either of us. I don't think you're in your primer phase, maintaining. I guess all I would say is there was some exciting stuff on your Instagram recently, partly from client stuff and also serial out of 10 marks, which was fun. So I would actually say to people, check out Pascal's Instagram, because I've hounded him to be a bit more active on there, and he is, and it's really cool. As always, I'm really active on mine. So the only thing that's happened this week for me that's of any note is my body weight is now officially 100% the highest it's ever been in my life. I don't think I ever went above 191 pounds, and then I didn't expect to hit 193 2 days solid. I thought it would come down. I thought it was like a freak weigh-in, but I've hit like over 193 pounds. So feeling heavy. It's pretty heavy for me. So that's really the only change. Nothing else has really happened, I don't think.
Nice. Yeah, in regards to me, I mean, you explained it already. Nothing really changed for me either, simply because primer phase. Last week of the primer phase in the fraud self before going into a deload. So calories stayed the same, training stayed the same. The only thing that changed was my Instagram activity. And I don't think that I have to talk about that more too much. So so guys, if you want to check it out, go on my Instagram and you can see a cereal connoisseur testing different kind of cereals.
Which one have you got one left to try?
Yeah, it's the Lucky Charm. No, I did test Lucky Charms chocolate. I have the
Dipping Dots you've had.
Yeah, what the other name again? Cookies, birthday cake,
Cookie Crisp.
Yeah, so I'm going to try that one. So
and that was from Patrick.
I'm quite excited.
Shout out to Patrick, good man.
Totally.
Where's my
one
cereal?
Of my clients, simply because I had birthday at the beginning of August, and such a generous thing to do, sending me a package of 3 packs of or boxes of cereal, which you can't get here in Germany. So that's always a good thing. No, but more so the gesture behind it. I mean, we as coaches, we are trying to help people to get to their best self and to the best of their abilities. And if they are doing something in return, I mean, it doesn't really necessarily have to be materialistic. Just things telling you that, I mean, you received something on Instagram the other day from one of your clients that you basically changed the life of some of your clients, right? And I mean, hearing something is just the highest reward.
Yeah,
you can get, in my opinion.
Paul Dent gave me a really nice little shout out and had some points of why coaching through me and Revive Stronger has been such a positive thing for him. Yeah, literally, that made my week. That was really, really kind of him. It was just humbling.
And funny enough, I have here still the letter from Patrick lying on my desk that always reminds me on why I'm doing that job, simply because the letter was just heartwarming and also nearly made me cry, simply because it just reminds you of why you're doing that and what impact you can have on other people. And I think that's just such a high reward, I think.
100%. And that's what coaching is. A lot of people kind of miss that element. So yeah, should we rock on into the questions? Nothing else to report?
So I think that the first question from Christopher Sobek, our man Chrissy from Potsdam. So the recommendations for Deltoid volume are quite high. Have you experienced good results with lower volumes yourself and or your clients? So Steve, do you want to touch on it first, or?
Yeah, I definitely can do. So for delts, the recommendations for volume are quite high, and I've got to be honest, my experiences have gone very much in line with that. I've not really ever seen people it's strange. Some of these smaller muscle groups, I almost find, especially when you split it up to side delts and rear delts, and you're not doing lots of maybe upright rows, which just smash everything and the traps, you can get a lot of sets in, but it can sometimes be a bit counterproductive, just like you end up feeling like, even though your rep count could be good and your performance is good, I find people kind of lose that little bit of kind of mind muscle connection and kind of report like they're getting it done, but it kind of feels a bit like, not sure if it's getting into that junk volume territory. So I think that's just where you have to be careful, because I think there's lots of exercises where you could probably just keep adding almost, but you end up doing it and not really having intent with the movement. But yeah, I actually think my experience has been quite in line with the delt volume recommendations. And for me, it makes sense. I don't know if you've had different experience, Pascal.
No, for me personally, it's the same way. I mean, you explained it quite well. If you're not already doing lots of overhead presses and stuff, which you also see with a lot of CrossFitters, for example. So nothing against CrossFitters. I have many friends who are doing CrossFit, and they have definitely a different goal, and that is performance and not physique, right? But I don't find the CrossFit aesthetics quite appealing to me, simply because it's most of the time really blocky. So they got a thick core and massive traps, massive shoulders, simply because they're just doing so many overhead pressing movements. And you can see it there that they are training the traps, the deltoids with a really high frequency and high volume eventually. And if you're not really doing that, I think that you won't really grow the delts to the highest extent, and that higher frequencies, higher volumes are probably the way to go. And I changed the way I'm programming for delts over the past couple of months and years quite drastically. So most of the time actually programming them on leg days or lower body sessions as well. Just at the end of the sessions, pounding out some lateral raises or some kind of delt movements just to get the frequency higher and the volume higher, because they recover quite quickly.
No, actually, that's a great point, because I talk about how if you have too many sets, they can kind of feel like you don't get as good quality. Spreading out and having higher frequency is exactly the way I've gone with it. Typically programming them 4 times per week kind of for those. And I didn't bring up anterior deltoids because I kind of feel like, I don't know, horizontal pressing, and if you do any vertical pressing with that as well, you kind of just get so much anterior deltoid. You don't have to, I haven't programmed ever in my life front raises, which is, I'm happy to say that, because I just don't think anyone really needs that.
I did it in the beginning, and I didn't really benefit from it at all, especially because all I did in the past was kind of pressing movements. The time when I was working together with Mike Teixeira, for example, I did bench or pressing movements 4 times a week, and I only had GPP days, so general preparational,
general physical practice.
Yeah, exactly. Where I did a little bit of conditioning work to get my work capacity up, and additionally work some muscle groups that are neglected. And that was most of the time then a little bit of rowing movements, right? And during that time, I myself did additional front raises simply because I wanted to, and I thought that it might be beneficial to somehow. And that was a typical case of it was just a typical case of programming something without a proper reason or a proper reason for it. Because if you can't really explain why you are implementing something, simply don't implement it into your programming. There should always be a reason for why you're doing something. And if you don't have a good explanation, away with it. Like the 50 euros in the club.
I have to say, I have done front lateral raises. I haven't given them to anyone. But I remember lying on an incline bench and having like a straight bar and doing them like this. It was horrendous. It's like the most horrific exercise I've ever done.
Yeah. So shall we move on to the next question then?
Yeah.
So do you want to read the next one? I think we don't want to cover like MRV questions or something, because it has been covered to death, I think.
Okay, so we can pass Jonathan. That's quite a long question. Andrew, shall I read Andrew's question out?
Yeah, let's do that one.
Cool. So our buddy Andrew has said what to do if a muscle group fails you before deload week, but all others are still gaining. Say you started too heavy for that muscle from week 1, or it just does last out through meso. So I think that's basically saying, if we gave an example, maybe your quads have hit their MRV, you're seeing maybe even detriments in performance, but every other muscle group is going fine. I actually don't have a long answer at this at all. I don't know if you've got an answer.
Neither do I. It's a rather short one. It's just like, okay, learn from it for the next mesocycle and adjust accordingly for the next one.
Yeah, and all I'd say is for that muscle group, just take like a light session early and then finish off your mesocycle with that one having had that light session, go into your deload, and then learn next time, because I've definitely made that mistake where I've kind of exerted myself too early, too soon, and then everything's failed.
Cool. Let's move on to Joseph Kaufman, as an English speaker, right? So Kaufman is actually a German, like a salesman.
Oh,
just as an information here. So how soon after contest can you minicut? 12 weeks, 20 weeks?
Do you want to take it, or shall I?
Yeah, I mean, you can do that immediately after that. It's not recommended at all, right? Yeah, it's not, but it's not recommended at all. And I think that my views on it changed as well over the last couple of months, especially after the seminar in London, where I saw Mike present on the period after contest prep and how to actually set it up for the upcoming contest prep as well. And I think that, what was it again? 8, 12. I think the first mini cut is set like 24 weeks after your contest. So the first period of time would be just to gain a little bit once again, then taking a maintenance in which you are. So maintenance in regards to your training session, but in regards to gaining weight a little bit higher once again, gaining through the maintenance phase, and then hit a gaining phase again after that for 1 to 2 mesocycles. And then maybe you are at the point where you want and you're considering taking a mini cut. But I think that the longer you can actually push it away from the contest prep, the better it is and the better you will feel afterwards.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. That's pretty much where I ended up doing it, where I had a mass phase straight after my prep, which was like 5 weeks long, maintained or tried his best to maintain body weight and body composition. Like Mike explained in that video really well, the actual seminar, but we're selling the videos obviously so you can get this content. You probably won't end up actually maintaining body composition. And then, like a 15-week mass, if you can be kind of well measured with it and you don't let it turn into a Falk and you can gain at a decent rate, then that's probably where the first mini cut might take place if you deem it appropriate. But I think a lot of people, and maybe your past thoughts, and don't tell me if I'm out of line, Pascal, I think a lot of people kind of consider a mini cut should be like years after your prep. You shouldn't be cutting for ages. And I think that might be okay and the right thing to do for some people. But I think if you've had a very well measured approach to everything going into your comp and the transition out of it, I think you can actually do one relatively soon afterwards, and you shouldn't have to be recovering for years after your show.
Totally. But the emphasis lies on relative, right? That is always individual dependent, and it isn't set in stone. If you don't feel healthy or you don't feel like you are well recovered, don't just throw it in because someone said that it is the thing to do after 20 weeks or 24 weeks. It's always individual dependent. We know that, right? It doesn't really help to always say it depends. We all know that. But in that case, it's just like, whenever you feel ready for it, mentally, but also physiologically, you can do that. But once again, be honest with yourself, whether you really need that or whether it is beneficial for you in the long term or not.
Mm-hmm. Completely. Shall I ask Muffins? I won't ask. I'll try the last name. The last name's hard. The first name's easy.
Muffins Pizzikas, I would say.
Pizzikas. Shall I ask that one? Should we try and...
Yeah, let's do that one.
Cool. So she or he, I'm not actually sure what gender that is. I feel like it's a she, don't know why. Muffins, could be either. Actually, that's like no gender, really. So Let's say I'm in a mass and my daily calorie consumption is 3,200, but I know that I have a big weekend with a Saturday and Sunday dinner and party celebration. If I calculate that my total weekly caloric intake is 22,400 calories, can I drop my calories back to 2,000 Monday to Friday so that I have an extra 6,000 calories to play with during said celebrations? So you certainly can. I think you'll see with mine and Pascal's answer, we're not ever like black and white, like you must do this, you have to do this. Like when we said about the mini cut, it's like, well, you could mini cut straight after your competition. It's just a very silly idea. So you certainly can do what you're saying there. And I guess the answer is, would it be optimal? And I think it's not going to be optimal. And then it's like, well, how detrimental is it going to be? And I personally don't think that's going to be highly detrimental if it's done now and then. It's kind of like birthdays, Christmas, these sort of events where maybe you're not even off target. You're actually averaging out where you want to be. So actually the downside is going to be that acute kind of on those 2,000 calorie days. How's your performance going to be? Probably not quite as good. On the 6,000 calorie days, are we potentially seeing some detrimental nutrient partitioning? Maybe, but in reality, what does Broderick say? Kind of the long-term average is what wins out. It's not kind of the individual days. I don't know if you got a different perspective on that.
Yeah, kind of, simply because just to remind ourselves that we can still gain muscle while we're in a deficit and also lose fat while we are in a surplus. The more advanced you get, the less obvious it is and observational it is, right? But it's still always happening at the same time. The ratio just switches from one end to the other. That being said, I think that this aggressive and severe approach is probably not the best way to go about it, because yes, when you're only doing it for 1 week out of the entire year, that's probably not detrimental at all. But and also when we take a look at the short-term overfeeding studies, when most of the calories from the overfeeding comes from carbohydrates or protein, you are storing less fat than when you're overeating on fat as well. However, due to it's being a dinner party and celebration and wedding, probably there are probably also foods that are high in fat as well. So the likelihood of you storing fat in a short amount of time where you're overfeeding is highly increased. And as a matter of fact, you are in a caloric deficit for 6 days then. Let's say it's only for 1 day at the end of the week. Let's say it is on a Sunday, 6 days, you're running a 2,000 calorie deficit. You're already losing a little bit of fat mass throughout the time, but also a little bit of lean body mass tissue. When you're now overeating on 6,000 calories, right? And there are, I think, probably a higher fat intake as well. You're going to store more fat than definitely synthesize muscle tissue along the way. Let's just say you're doing an approach like that the entire year, because I know that some people do, right? It will probably at least that's what I think, and I would assume you are ending up with a worse body composition than someone who would run a steady pace of a caloric surplus or 20,400 calories all week long, and as an average, right? So I think due to the massive fluctuations in the caloric intake, you will probably have a little more fat storage than muscle tissue storage, simply because you're not synthesizing muscle tissue in 1 day that you lost throughout 6 days, right? I don't know if you have anything else to say there, but I think the question is only that, yes, you can do that, but is it really necessary to slash that many calories, like saving up 1,200 calories per day, only that you can go out and have 6,000 calories to play with on the weekend? You can take a more conservative approach. You can save up like 200 to 300 calories per day. Then you are closer to your maintenance level, or even at around maintenance, and then have a little bit more leeway to play with on that day, but you're not going crazy and YOLO mode and binging kind of, or having a binging behavior. I would say take a more conservative approach, and that will probably be the middle ground, right? You're still enjoying that day, you're still having a little bit more calories to play with, but you are not like that going down that extreme road of overeating.
And the only thing I would say in addition to that, I think we're very much in agreement, and I don't think you'll disagree with this point either, but with clients, I have had them where they have had a similar thing. They're not suggesting as an extreme an approach, but they are suggesting, can I save like 200 calories every day and then bank them for the weekend? And my suggestion is always, don't actually be proactive, please be reactive. And what I find is people go into the events less ravenous and hungry, and so they end up overeating by less. And I just see that as a more like superior strategy than being reactive, than being proactive, because I think people set themselves up for a binge rather than kind of, sometimes they go into it and they're like, actually, I don't really feel like restricting the other days of the week. Let's just not actually overeat. So, yeah.
Just to give another example, because you see it very often with people who are coming out of a cutting phase, right? When they are ending up maybe in a binge cycle. They are overeating on, 10,000 calories, and then they are trying to make up for it for the next 6 days. And then they are falling back again, overeating on 10,000 calories. And they are ending up only gaining fat because in such a short time of that one day, muscle mass can't be synthesized to that extent. Then when you were to spread out that caloric intake evenly throughout the entire week, and then you were ending up with only storing the fat, but not really synthesizing the muscle tissue along the way, and you're probably being more frustrated in the end because you're spending time and it is less beneficial. I just wanted to give out that example as well because it's happening to so many people.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to. Binge purge cycle is just a horrible thing to get into, so you want to avoid that. Next question. Have you got one lined up?
It's again an MRV question, especially from Mike. So I will skip that. Sorry for that, guys. But I mean, if you want to have these questions answered by Mike, we are giving out the Q&As where we are asking for questions from Mike, or sign up for RP Plus. We have an affiliate link down in the description below, and there you can always ask Mike and James for the things you are curious about in regards to especially these kind of things. So Matt Phone, hi guys. One of the biggest fears I have whilst attempting my first serious fat loss regime is losing excess lean muscle mass and those hard-earned gains. Provided appropriate nutrition and resistance training are accounted for, how can we know if muscle loss is or will be excessive, given I am attempting to drop the leanest I've ever been? Can I only guesstimate by comparing before and after shots, or should I try to use historical relative 1 RM strength at a given body mass?
Thanks, guys. Love your work.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Thank you, man.
So just to sum it up, or just to make it a little bit more understandable, he's asking for the fear of muscle loss during a cutting phase and how he can actually measure that, whether he is ending up at a better body composition after finishing that cut or not.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right? So do you want to start, Steve?
Yeah, sure. So I think first of all, it's something that you shouldn't probably worry about. It's more something that could potentially happen, but you just do everything in your approach to ensure that it's not happening. So you lose weight at an appropriate pace, you set protein intake to an appropriate amount, you weight train and resistance train appropriately. So you're setting yourself up in every single way so that during the process, if you are being consistent and adherent, you're doing everything you can to promote muscle retention and not muscle loss. And it's not hard. I mean, it's actually relatively easy, in my opinion, to maintain muscle mass during a cutting phase, especially if you're not kind of doing contest prep. I think if you're doing everything appropriately, you're not dieting for an excessive period of time, you're not dieting excessively aggressively, you should be able to maintain a pretty decent performance, and you should be able to maintain all your muscle mass. What I would say is, how do you compare this? I think photos are brilliant. I think body measurements are brilliant. I think DEXA scans, if kept very consistently, can be helpful. But that all said, if you're going to perform kind of performance and strength performance and relative to your weight performance, I would say if you are going to compare that, then compare it like for like. So you don't want to compare like the end of your mass to the end of your cut performance, because at the end of your mass, you're going to be in a surplus. You're going to be very energetic. Whereas at the end of your cut, you're going to be incredibly depleted. So you probably want to wait after a couple of weeks, give yourself an opportunity to be maintaining this leaner body mass and see how your performance is at the end of maybe a month of maintaining. And then that's where you've got an appropriate energy balance. And if your performance is kind of as per or what you'd expect, and then that will give you a more realistic kind of, give you more a realistic view, because I think a lot of people compare like the end of cut performance to the end of mass performance. It's like that's, even if you do it for relative body weight, it's not the same energy kind of balance. So that's going to make it look poorer, because I think even during a contest prep, you might not lose that much muscle, but your performance is probably quite in the sink at the end of your prep, and more extremely because of the fact you're in such an energy deficit. Whereas once you've like a month back kind of gaining, say, your performance will be a much more realistic marker. I think you'll gain that much quicker back just because of energy availability.
No, that was amazingly well explained, Steve.
Oh, good.
And the only thing I have to add there is just, so Lachlan Mitchell, he's a researcher from Australia, and he is looking at natural bodybuilding and all that kind of stuff. And when he was conducting the research and looking at the contest prep, so the case studies he conducted, he has found that some of the contest prep clients, or not clients, but subjects actually gain muscle tissue throughout a contest prep, which is quite contrary to what many people believe is possible in such an extreme scenario. So when you take a look at that one, that some natural athletes are actually gaining some muscle tissue while they are prepping for contest prep and ending up with a better or higher muscle tissue on their frame than prior to starting that. It just shows that many people shouldn't be too concerned about that, as long as they are doing following a proper resistance training regime, and also a good nutritional program, while having the recovery management and sleep management in check. And I think that especially when we take a look at sleep, that is so important to actually have that ready and in check, so that your body composition is actually playing in your favor than actually going to your detriment afterwards. No,
100% in agreement. And that's really interesting, actually. I'd like to see that study. That sounds mad. Yeah, totally. I'd love that at the end of my prep to have more muscle.
Yeah, totally. And that's so surprising. And I mean, once again, goes so much against what many people believe is possible. And especially because we just mentioned that it's possible to gain muscle tissue while you're in a deficit, and also the other way around. And that is just the best example, right? Because contest prep or bodybuilding athletes are taking their body fat levels to extreme levels and are pushing their body to extreme levels. And when they are able to actually gain muscle tissue in a caloric deficit, normal recreational lifters can do so as well.
Yeah, I think it's just a good case of don't limit yourself by what you think is possible, and just work your hardest to achieve what you think. Like, you might even think it's impossible, but still work your hardest to achieve that. I think that's good.
And it's always what we are recommending to people, that when you're in a deficit, you still want to train for hypertrophy and go in there with a mindset of building tissue and not retaining tissue. And this is something that has changed for me as well over the past years, because in the past when I was cutting, I was always thinking like, I'm only going in to retain my muscle mass. But now it's more so of a case that I'm going in and still I'm training as if I'm in a gaining phase as well.
So I don't know if that actually partly answers Holger Dumpsky's question, where he's just said, the most surprising scientific results for you. And this is that's quite surprising to me, actually, to hear people gaining muscle at the end. I don't know if I've got nothing at the top of my head springs out as like a most surprising scientific result.
So most surprising, I mean, there are so many things that always baffle me and surprise me, especially when it comes to supplement research. But it's also not just H&B, but also everything, simply because it's so limited. And when it comes to supplement research, most of the stuff that is released and published is only then playing in the favor of a supplement. Most of the things that are going against it are most of the time not even conducted or published. So when, after a while, there comes more and more research that goes against the benefits of a certain supplement, it always baffles me, because it just confirms that supplements are just that, and most of the time aren't really the magic pill that give you all the gains, or that supplements are just not as important as many people make them out to be. Another thing that I found really interesting, not really surprising, but it just confirmed what was theorized for a long period of time, was that epigenetic study where they took a look at the muscle memory effect. That was what I wanted to say. That was really interesting, and I would love to see more studies being conducted in that area, just because it was only the beginning, but it already gave it somehow an understanding of what is going on, and it just opened up a door to a completely new environment, I think.
I guess actually something really surprising that I've read recently, I don't know if it's like recent science, but I've been reading Why Do We Sleep by Matthew Walker, and he recently spoke about how badly your performances kind of deters when you have insufficient sleep. And I can't remember the exact numbers of hours and things, but it was basically talking about actually being underslept is more of a risk when you're driving than being drunk. Because what happens when you're underslept is you have a micro sleep, which everyone can kind of envisage this. You just kind of go and you nod off for a second. That is time where you can't be braking. That's time where you can't be turning, versus someone who's drunk who would just have a delayed response. They're not stopping and not having time to do anything. They're still awake. They're just delayed. So actually more accidents and more deaths occur because people are sleeping, having underslept, than drunk driving, which is crazy because it's so easy to undersleep. And it's not like you can't be on the road if you haven't slept 6 hours or more. You can still do that. And people who undersleep are often like lorry drivers, truck drivers, driving these massive things. And I think it was on average when they have an accident and they cause death, it's like 4.5 other people also die. So these people are like chronically underslept. They're having these micro sleeps and then they're killing 4.5 other people. That to me shocked. The more I hear about sleep and when you undersleep and the deleterious effects it has, I'm just like, wow, I need to nail sleep so much more.
Yeah, totally.
It's actually nuts.
Absolutely. And it's funny because the more I'm in that field and the older I get as well, the more I come to the realization how important sleep is. I mean, we've talked about it already so often, and we kind of beat it to death already. But I mean, it's just there was a discussion recently in our Facebook group, and it's funny because who's it called? What's he called again? Matthew Walker.
Yeah.
Right? And funny enough, just a couple of days after I listened to Matthew Walker presenting on sleep, there was our podcast roundtable, which will come out soon, where Mike is talking about sleep, and he's basically saying sleep is non-negotiable. And it's funny because Matthew Walker said the same thing, right? And it's just like, it just goes to show that sleep, it's non-negotiable, non-debatable. It is one of the most single important things for your progress. And I'm not just talking about progress in regards to training, nutrition, but progress in life, because of cognitive abilities are so much down-regulated when you are sleep deprived. We are talking not about sleep deprivation where you're not sleeping at all, but even sleep deprivation where you're not getting in like 1-2 hours of sleep per night less. That has already a massive impact on your overall health, but also on your overall performance.
No, 100%. Don't know if we want to go to his next question. I don't have a lot of thoughts on this, to be honest. He said intraset stretching or weighted stretching useful. I think basically interset stretching, maybe when you're warming up to like help loosen yourself up. But apart from that, I'm not seeing any hypertrophy benefits towards us. At the moment, I don't think there's significant evidence to suggest that. Weighted stretching 100%, like when you're in the bottom of a squat, the bottom of like a dumbbell press, you get a weighted stretch. Do I think you need to then like exaggerate that? Like they've got the bird studies where they weighted their wings and then they hypertrophied loads. Like it's just a bit of an unrealistic protocol to put yourself through. So I think the weighted stretch is great. So I don't really have anything else to say though.
There was recently a post Chris Beardsley made on hypertrophy and what is causing more obvious and visual hypertrophy, and that isn't the stretching component where the muscle fibers are stretched and really stretched into the length, but more so in thickness, that they are getting more dense. So I think that weighted stretching has probably some benefits to it, because the muscles are becoming stretched, and especially under load, something like an RDL is highly metabolically disrupting. But I think that other parts are probably playing a bigger role in hypertrophy than weighted stretching. At least that's what my assumption now. It could always change though.
And then he's just asked, training with limited time during the week, would you train a complete body workout on Tuesday and a legs push-pull with focus on volume at weekend, or an upper-lower 4 times per week? Again, I don't have a lot to say on this apart from I would just divvy up volume as seemingly appropriate. I don't think there's necessarily a split that's the magic split there. I think there's loads of ways you could do it potentially. It depends on the person.
Once again, a shout out to the guys from Mars, because they just reviewed a research in the latest episode in the latest research review from Mars, where they looked at people only training on the weekend and then having like 5 days rest, and comparison to people who are running a normal split throughout the week, whether there is a significant amount of difference in regards to the hypertrophy. And they didn't really find that much of a significant difference. Is it the most optimal? Probably not. And the sessions will probably be like hours long, especially the more advanced you get. But is it possible at some time in your life? Sure. I mean, when you are having other things to do, when you're really busy, I don't know, due to your job, due to studying, I don't know, whether you have a child and you can't simply work out throughout the week, that might be an alternative for a short period of time to maintain your levels, or to even slightly progress for a short period of time. But I think it would always be good to spread it more evenly across the week. But it's still possible. I mean, and Greg Knuckles brought up a great example of one of the strongest men there ever have been, like top 10 strongest man, who only trained on the weekends. But yeah, I mean,
genetic freak as well.
Yeah.
It had to be one of the top strongest men anyway. But no, completely. I think, well answered. Have you got one you want to?
So Will, one of my clients, Will Wallstead.
Yes.
Approximately how long after changing your caloric intake does the body seem to react and adapt by gaining or losing weight? And if your answer is that it depends on how much the intake has changed, can you give an estimated example with, i.e. 300 calories?
Depends.
Yeah, so in that case, it really, really highly depends on the individual. Just to give you an example of Steve's old contest or last contest prep, because I think that is such a good example of how the body is actually flexible in its own approach, and that things can change visually, but doesn't really move on the scale. Thus, you can't really or shouldn't really do the adjustments when it's not appropriate to do so. So just to give an example, Steve was maintaining his weight for 4 weeks, but visually he got leaner and leaner. I mean, when you only were to look at that one variable, and that is the scale weight, you would have made the according adjustments throughout that time, because you thought that you're stalling or stagnating. But this is where the importance of other variables tracking tools come into play. That's why we are also tracking things like photos, taking things like girth measurements or circumference measurements, also performance as well, right? Because it could possibly be, just to give another example, that your body is going through a recomposition, your weight is holding steady, but the girth measurements could tell us that we are still losing weight around the midsection and other areas are actually increasing, right? So it's really dependent on the individual and how the one reacts, and also how adaptive your metabolism is. So it could potentially be that you are increasing the calories by 200 to 300 calories, but your metabolism speeds up so much, and your habits, your adaptations, just from a behavioral perspective, is that you are getting more active on a day-to-day basis as well. And then you are seeing maybe some changes in your scale weight for the first couple of days. And then you're starting out once again because your metabolism and your behaviors are so adaptive to that increase in calories. The other way around holds true as well. I mean, someone like me who doesn't have an adaptive metabolism gains weight quickly and loses weight quickly when I'm making some adjustments. And I see the scale weight creeping up and dropping quite early when I'm making the changes. In a couple of 1 to 2 to 3 days, I see the changes immediately.
No, yeah, really well answered. Like, there is no way other than it depends, because it's really something I will say is as you track and you get good, consistent data, you'll learn a lot about yourself and how reactive you are. So you'll kind of learn how you react to changes in carbohydrate intake, how long it takes you traditionally to start seeing scale weight losses, what sort of calorie amounts you gain well at and lose well at. All of this data is really helpful, because I know I have, for example, I could bring up Jono, shout out to Jono, or shout out to Dan. Both of them react strongly to carbohydrate changes. So if they go into like a diet break after kind of dieting for a period of time, their weight will easily spike up by like easily kilos, but it'll drop right back down afterwards, and like by even more. Whereas other people will lose through that week, other people will maintain through that week. So I think having a historic data set for yourself is so powerful, and you can reflect back to that, and that can reassure you for decisions going forward. So like Pascal said with my prep, I'll look back to the prep in 2017 and be like, well, look, I maintained for that period of time. So when I'm in prep this next time round, I'll know if I'm maintaining. If other measurements are going in the right direction, I can reflect back to that period of time and be like, right, I don't need to make a change. What I would say is, the higher body fat percentage you are, the more quickly you should see scale weight changes. Like, there shouldn't be probably 4 weeks with your scale weight not coming down, unless like you're a newbie and potentially gaining muscle mass. Again, there's always caveats and depends. But the leaner you are and the more advanced you are, kind of that's, and when you're gaining weight, that's probably when you need to take longer averages in terms of body weight change, because there's just less muscle mass to lose or muscle mass to gain. Gaining muscle mass is slower. So I guess that's really all I'd have extra to say on that.
Yeah. One more thing, and that is, don't make the adjustments prematurely, only because you are a little bit afraid of waiting or you're impatient. And I see a lot of people actually doing that, going down that road, unfortunately, because that can shoot you, or you're shooting yourself in the foot in the long term. Because let's just say, I know that you are right now not cutting, but let's just take the example of cutting. When you're always dropping the calories as soon as you don't see the drop in weight, right, you are ending up at a pretty low caloric intake quite early already. That's why we want to track, once again, other variables and take a look at your lifestyle. Also, the things you're eating, right? Are there other things that have an impact on why the scale isn't moving before eventually making the adjustments to your calories? I would always then try to look at other variables first, rule them out, so that I know that, okay, has nothing changed, or did I really change something in my lifestyle, or has anything an impact on the readings right now? Because it's so easy to fall into the trap of that when you are in a stressful situation, that the scale doesn't really move. But it's not because you're not in a caloric deficit. You probably still are, but it is kind of covered or kind of masked by the water retention from the stress, right? That's why I always try to take a look at these variables first, because otherwise, yeah, once again, you are shooting yourself in the foot in the long term, because you're either increasing the calories too quickly or dropping the calories too quickly. And both ways are most of the time not the right way to go about things.
Yeah, I think that's part of the role of the coach massively, is to look at all of these outside factors and identify them. Because if you've adhered and you've been consistent to what you would know is like a 500 calorie deficit or something, and you haven't lost weight after 2 weeks, it's very unlikely that you're not in a deficit, especially if you're looking at yourself and you're hungry, your body composition is looking better, your performance is good. Like, remember all of these other factors are more important than just singly what the scale says. Because I can even remember to your contest prep, actually, Pascal, when you were dieting, and I think your scale weight may have even come up at one point, where you just increased the volume of food you were consuming. So that's something to take into consideration as well when you are changing different elements, even like just the food volume, let alone like carbohydrates to fats. If you're going out for meals, sodium intake changing, there's so many things to think about. So there is an element of trust in the process, which is so important. And I always say a big part of my role as a coach is actually just keeping clients doing what they should be doing and sticking to it rather than changing things too in a hurry, because that's what shoots loads of people in the foot, like you said.
Yeah. Cool. Shall we take the last question?
Yeah, so that is from...
Because you are in a little bit of a hurry, but I think that we still have time to actually cover that one before we call it a day.
Yes, I think Neil DNL, Neil's DNL, I guess that's his name.
Neil.
So water cut experience for weight classes. Are you inferring something from this? I'm not exactly sure what he's asking.
So I think that either he's referring to powerlifters or especially sports that are requiring a weight class, mostly powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting or something like MMA, not M&A. But when he is specifically asking for bodybuilding, because I know that some people do that as well to actually make weight for a certain weight class when there is a weight class restriction and not a height restriction, I have never done it myself with any of my competitors, cutting weight for a weight class. I know that some people are doing it when they're right on the edge and they could go into a lower weight class. Then it might be appropriate to do so. When it then comes to something like powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting, I mean, it's so broad of a topic. I mean, we could definitely talk about it because I have done it myself, doing weight cut, even a quite drastic one. But because we are more so a physique-based channel, right? We are only sticking to physique athletes. And in that case, it might be appropriate for some in some single cases, but usually I wouldn't recommend to cut any kind of water or manipulate the water if you don't have a coach at your side who knows what you're doing.
No, that last point is so important because both for any sport or physique, like water is what gives muscle fullness a lot of the time. You're not going to have a full muscle if you're completely depleting water. You're also going to look flatter. You potentially won't even look shredded. You'll look soft. So I think actually cutting water is a really dangerous thing to mess around with, especially if you aren't kind of changing electrolytes appropriately or whatever you're doing with that. I just think it can fall so wrong. So physically, you could look so poor if you start playing around with water too much. You don't know what you're doing. And then additionally to that, with sports, if you're at all dehydrated, you're seeing degraded performance, which is not ideal at all either. So it's really risky doing it. And like Pascal said, you could do it and there might be times at which is appropriate, but 9 out of 10 times for us is not something we would play around with because we want the best for our athlete, and whether or not that means they're in a heavier weight class or not, we just want their best performance. It's not about unless you're going to go pro or win a competition. I just don't, and we have to remember at the end of the day, a lot of the time it's like plastic trophies and things as well. And we do this for enjoyment and you're not getting paid for it. So you just have to remember all of those things.
Yeah, and just to give you a bit of a personal story here, in 2014, I was flying back from Tokyo, and in that week, I had a powerlifting competition. I needed to make weight for the 75 kilogram weight class, and I was, due to the flight, holding on to so much water that I needed to cut 4 kilograms in a couple in the last 3 days because I started my water cut already in Tokyo, and everything above 10% of body weight loss as a dehydration protocol gets into the range of becoming life-threatening. And I just want to point out the severity of that because you can die from cutting weight, right? You can be so dehydrated that you are just dead, like overdosing on insulin, kind of, right? from one minute to the next, you're just that. And when I was doing that, and I cut it like 4 kilograms, and in total I cut it 8 kilograms, right, which was close to being 10%, a little bit over 10% even. I felt like dying. Like for the last 2 days, that was the worst experience I've ever had physically in my entire life. I can't even describe it. I was just dying. My entire body didn't really function anymore. I needed to lay down on the cold floor because my body was just like totally out of control. I was constantly seeing like thunders in front of my eyes and just glitter all the time because my body was already so dehydrated, right? And I think I was right on the edge to actually fainting and just passing away to actually kind of getting to the hospital or actually dying, right? Because I think it was, when I look back, 11% or something in a short amount of time. And I needed to take extreme measures, and I would never, ever once again do that again, and also recommend someone doing that. I mean, it simply isn't worth it. It simply isn't necessary. And if you don't have a professional at your side, and especially also someone who is monitoring your health, please don't do it. It's simply not worth it. If you're only cutting like 1 to 2%, absolutely fine. Shouldn't be that much of a detriment in terms of your performance as well. But everything above 5% is absolutely unnecessary.
And there's things you can do before messing around with water as well. If you like reduce, like we talked about food volume, if you just reduce your food volume quite a lot, maybe put yourself into maybe a slight deficit or just increase fat intake over carbohydrates, you'll probably see a drop in like weight that way, and possibly some water weight there as well. So, but I want to emphasize what Pascal said, because after my head injury, I was at risk of seizuring because of having electrolyte imbalances. And it's a serious thing, and that can cause death. So having had that experience of myself, it's not something I ever want to put someone else through, because you kind of feel like you could literally pass out at any time, and you potentially would. And I've heard horror stories of people causing really bad effects from this. So I think it can be done, but it has to be so tightly controlled. Totally.
And when I'm looking back in hindsight, I'm just thinking what a fucking immature guy I was during that time, because it was absolutely not worth it. It was a local meat. I was cutting like 11% of my water weight in only 7 days, right? And it was absolutely not worth it. I mean, I was on the edge of there was always a risk of dying for a local powerlifting meet. I mean,
how did you do?
I took 8 plates.
8
place of 20, I think.
Oh, that's not so bad.
Yeah, but still, it was, and also because my performance was just absolutely like shit.
Yeah.
Like every lift down about 10 to 20 kilograms.
Fuck.
Which is absolutely normal.
Yeah.
I mean, you dropped in a matter of 7 days 11% of water weight, and then you regained that weight in the matter of 24 hours. Of course, your body is just like fucked and thinking, what the hell is going on, and what the hell are you doing with me? Right.
Actually, on that point, the only thing I'd say is, rather than looking to do that sort of water cut, especially if you're not experienced with it, I'd definitely limit it, but try and get your weight to where you want it to be kind of a month before at least. And then you can go into the show not having to diet, not having to mess around with water, and you're in a much better place. So just periodize.
Yeah. Very good point.
Cool. So
cool.
Does that cover? I think that covered pretty much all the questions.
Yeah.
And we're in a good position after about an hour. I don't think we've got any particular announcements for anyone.
No.
What I do want to say actually was, on Pascal's Instagram, we didn't say what his Instagram tag handle was. So I'm on Revive Stronger. We have Team Revive Stronger, and Pascal is Pascal_Floor. FLOR, not floor.
Yeah.
We got some kickback with our last names last time.
Yeah. Our names are just too amazing.
They're just so everyday. Everyone has a Hall and
They are. I just think that we need to have a son together. we need to be a gay couple, but still, yeah, and we name him Dance. So because we are a gay couple, he is actually called Dance Hall and Dance Floor. So, yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty much it. Have I got anything else interesting to say? No, I think we should leave it. Otherwise, we will just ramble. So thank you as always, guys, for listening. Really appreciate it. Absolutely love the feedback on these. And if you want to get in and ask us a question, actually, we're more than likely just going to put it into our group, because that seems to be a great place to get really great questions. So yeah, I would go and join there, and we will see you in there, and we look forward to interacting with you.
Cool. Cheers, guys.